Europe. Irishmen fought Italians, who fought Dutchmen, who fought Greeks. There was far more violence. And this, to me, is the critical weakness of Mr. Taylor's argument. You yourself said this. Humans are so tribal, we can divide and fight brutally based on sports team affiliations. And two great questions from the audience kind of pointed this out. When UK, the Chicago Cubs, the Boston Red Sox, many of these players win a championship or come close, several people die. Human beings, regardless of the presence of different racial groups in a society, in political science, fight to almost the same extent. White Europe, during the period when the whites came out and conquered the world, was the most violent region in the history of the world, and it was all white people. They just didn't see themselves as white people at the time. And that's the problem. It's meaningless to say there'd be no racism without race. That's like saying there'd be no sexism without sex. People would fight on the basis of class and ethnicity instead. So that I think is my main point from the debate. The United States of America is a much better place than Somalia, even though there's only one race in Somalia. I don't know if that's worth applause, but it's a pretty core point there.
No. We want to thank both of you gentlemen, and we're going to go ahead and proceed to the next gentleman, please. And again, one question per person.
What's up, Jared? I sat here and listened to you mislead my classmates with a lot of your statements. You know, with words you can say things and you can kind of make people have a different perception. So with Ferguson and Baltimore, those were not race riots. Those were rebellions against oppressive systems that we refer to as white supremacy. Also, whites do commit crimes at about the same rates that blacks do. Does it matter what crime it is? Whether you're selling drugs or whether you're smoking them, it's still a crime. Christopher Columbus, when he came here, it said in Christopher Columbus' son's diary that he seen Ethiopians when he came here. So he actually thought that he came to India. So, you know, like, it wasn't just white people and blacks. There were blacks here. There were already people of darker skin complexion here. Also, Europeans were easily to assimilate into American society. That way they could get better housing, better jobs, and all types of other things because of their skin color. It wasn't because they were smarter or their brains were bigger or any other ignorance like that. Also, you talk about the wealth. You talk about the wealth. You talk about the wealth that is in this country. That wealth that is in this country was built off the backs of diversity. With something from Mr. Reilly here, NBA, NFL. That's a lot of money invested in something when you could play one player $4 million or $50 million or $500 million.
And sir, we want to thank you so much for your comments.
My question to you is,
excuse me, let them answer.
What is the root of your racist rhetoric? Is it for preservation or is it due to fear?
And 2 minutes will start now, sir.
I talk about these things because I think it's important to base a society on a realistic understanding of human nature, not on a fantasy. A realistic understanding of human nature is that people are generally tribal. And as I have pointed out, and as this audience has pointed out, whites and blacks can see the same thing, look at the same thing, and find something completely different. Ferguson is an excellent example of this. I think that it is absolutely vital that we realize that this is, therefore, a problem. It's been a problem for 400 years. It's a problem we have not solved. And I believe it is a problem we cannot solve unless we recognize that conflict is inherent to bringing races together. The professor just said that it is a tautology and meaningless to say that there's no racism without race. That is not a tautology. Look at Japan. Look at Iceland. Look at Korea. Look at places that are monoracial societies. There is no racism. There is no race violence. There is no problem of the hundreds and thousands of kinds that we have to solve through formal grievance procedures over and over and over and never get it right. I think that this is an insoluble problem unless we recognize that people are happier when they are with their own group. We should establish that as a fundamental understanding of human beings rather than constantly trying to force people together who do not wish to be together. And prisons are the prime example of this. We are actually killing people by forcing them to integrate racially when they would prefer to be apart.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Dr. Reilly, any response? 2 minutes, sir.
Oh, I didn't know I was getting 2 minutes to respond
This
to
isn't
each of the
fair.
questions
Of course
directed
it's
at
me.
Well,
Jared Taylor.
if you have a response, if not, we'll proceed with the
Well,
other comments.
Again, I would say that I think, first of all, I think that Jared Taylor is very skillfully fighting a rearguard action. What he is doing is protesting vociferously a basic fact of change. In 200 years, there won't be any white people. There probably won't be any black people either. As we integrate, as we date, as we commingle as a culture, most people will look like me or like many of the students I see in this room. So that can produce one of two reactions, either happiness. The human race is moving forward. We once were tribes, we now are races and nations, soon will be a world, or it can produce this sort of impassioned defense. Most people prefer to be with their own. I find I prefer to be with other city people or other black people or whatever the case might be some of the time. And sometimes I like to go to a jazz club or a Chinese restaurant where people are very different from me. I think both are reality, both exist within the human psyche, but the second is only possible in a civilized and diverse society. And I think Mr. Taylor's panic and fear comes from worry about his own eradication. Something that, if you look at the end of life, is inevitable for all of us. Now, in terms of the specific question there, in Japan, first of all, in Japan there's intense conflict and fairly frequent violence between the Japanese and ethnic Koreans, as I'm sure you know. Both of them are Asian in our terms. I would say the level of racial or ethnic conflict is roughly comparable to much of the United States.
Wrong.
They just don't
Wrong.
have, well, I mean, ask a Japanese Korean, which I've had the luxury of doing several times in Chicago. The point is that they are not, in your terms, racist. So obviously in Japan, there were fewer complaints filed on the basis of race because 90% of the country is Japanese. That's why I refer to that as a silly point. I'd be interested in seeing how many complaints are filed on the basis of sexual harassment in the Tokyo subway, where people are frequently brutally grabbed, women getting on cars, fist fights break out among male salarymen. But yes, there's very little racial conflict in Japan because there isn't much race. Although Koreans might disagree.
Thank you, Dr. Reilly. And because we have a very robust discussion going on, and we have many students, and we want everyone to voice their opinion or their question, everyone will be allotted 1 minute, and that will also include for the speakers 1 minute, now decreased from 2 minutes, okay? Because we do want to make sure we leave out of here in a respectable time. So you have 1 minute, sir.
First off, Mr. Taylor, I'd like to thank you for being here. And respectfully, I ask that you don't interrupt me as you have my peers. I think that your perception shows your biases. It reflects what you really think about the black race. Everything and every response that you've responded to has been in support of the white race. And if you think that we do no wrong, then that's where you're wrong. Okay, and the fact that you said you blacks, that also reflects your biases and the reason why you're here today. And my question to you is, do these problems really stem from racial diversity or racism? Because your exact mindset is the reason why we have so much separation in this country. And the exact mindset that you're on is the reason that people have been oppressed for thousands of years. So, and just some statistics for you, because I really didn't buy into most of the statistics that you suggested, is
Sorry, we have to keep to a time. 1 minute, sir. Do you want to respond, Mr. Taylor? And then Dr. Reilly, 1 minute. Well, we want to be respectful, so he can get back in line, and that's totally fine, but we have to be respectful and have order. Every one of you all are important. We want to hear your thoughts. Mr. Taylor, please.
I have never ever suggested that whites can do no wrong. I said that you can look back at all of the racial violence, oppression, disagreement, tension in the United States, and if you wish, you can blame it 100% on white people if you wish to. All I'm saying is that none of that would have happened without the racial diversity of having two races trying to share the same territory. Now, maybe you would argue that black people bring out absolutely the worst in whites. Maybe you would want to make that argument. If that's the case, why should whites want to subject themselves to that kind of temptation or that kind of situation? My point is, however, I do not believe that whites are unique in this respect. In the United States today, we have violence and separation of attention that crosses practically every racial line. And that's why, to me, the question is not what's wrong with white people, it's not what's wrong with black people, it's not what's wrong with Hispanics, it's what's wrong with
Thank you very much, Mr.
diversity.
Taylor. Thank you. Dr. Reilly, if you have a response, 1 minute, please. And just a heads up to everyone here, I've just received notification that we will only take 3 last questions. Anyone that has any input, I'm gonna ask that you please take this to Twitter, and I'm gonna ask that you tweet your response with the hashtag KSU debate. And you will receive a response. We want this to continue on in a professional, scholarly way. So we will take 3 final questions. Dr. Reilly, please continue if you have a response. 1 minute.
I do have a quick response, and as I understand, we're responding to the young Caucasian gentleman's point. Much of what Mr. Taylor has attributed to racial diversity is in fact attributable to racism. Is that correct? Yeah, I think that that's a point that neither of us has really addressed during this debate. First, even if there is some, and this wasn't my theme for the debate, I think diversity is good. So I think that none of the advantages in society that I mentioned would exist without some civilized level of racial diversity. I also don't think you'd have an idea of white, what Mr. Taylor is using, if it weren't for centuries of Italians and Irishmen and so on unifying to compete with other groups like African Americans. But anyway, that's beside the point. I do think racism is something that can be worked on and that can be fixed. Humans do have an aggressive tribal instinct. It's called prey drive. All mammal predators have it, to be dorky for a second. However, humans are prone to a lot of problems. I have weak eyes, so I wear contact lenses. I don't just stumble around not seeing things. Similarly...
Thank you very much, Dr. Reilly. If you may, please, sir, your question or comment. 1 minute, please.
I first of all want to make a clarification. You stated that the blacks in Canada and Great Britain are more of the type of people who go for assistance living and welfare, and they are... You stated that the blacks in Canada and Great Britain were the type of people, that race, were the ones who were giving more assistance living than the blacks in America. Well, that's what you stated, and I got it stated down. But let me just make a clarification. In accordance to the report conducted by the Department of Agriculture, the race in America in 2015 that has the highest support of assistance living and welfare is the white. 60% white, 30% black, 10% Hispanic and Asian. That's not the way we act. This is my question. You talked about rights, and you say racism plays a major part in rights. Granted. But I'm surprised that Mr. Taylor did not mention the actual causes of those riots. If I can recall, I did research on riots, and if I can recall...
And thank you very much, sir. May we please have a response, Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
He actually was given 10 seconds extra because he was asked to repeat or for clarity. Okay, so please, let's maintain order.
I did not say that blacks in Canada or in Great Britain are more welfare dependent than blacks in the United States. I said that in terms of sociological profile, blacks in Canada and in Great Britain are very, very similar to blacks in the United States, despite the fact that the histories of those countries are completely different from the history of the United States in terms of slavery or segregation, Jim Crow. What I'm saying is that this reflects, in my view, something that is fundamental about different races and different groups. Now, when it comes to welfare dependency in the United States, you'll find that blacks are, if I recall correctly, they are about 4 or 5 times more likely than whites on a per capita basis to be getting some kind of government support. Hispanics are not too far behind, but Asians, interestingly enough, are less likely than whites to be getting some kind of government support.
And that is now 1 minute. Dr. Reilly, did you have any comments, sir? You have 1 minute, please.
On this particular question,